Well, how you been?
I'm sorry, I have to ask. Is that something on your face or is that a sore?
Where? Who, me?
Yeah, you.
Where?
Come here. If it's a pimple, it's a pimple. Have you had a mole on your face this entire time?
Spot right there?
Right there. You've always had this?
You're talking probably.
No way. I'm sorry. I apologize. That one?
That is chocolate.
Okay. Okay. I'm not going crazy.
That's where we start the podcast.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Removing chocolate from your face.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is it gone?
That's a good
It's
intro.
gone.
That's a good intro. I like that.
Oh, well, you can get up on that mic there.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, you can pull the mic closer.
Oh, yeah. Pull a little closer. Try and not hit my water.
The mic was made for man. Man wasn't made for the mic.
That's right. Oh, man. There we go.
Yeah.
Is that good? Can you hear me okay, Ben?
Perfect.
So how you been?
I've been good.
Good.
Yeah. It's been a while since I've seen you guys. Or seen you.
I mean,
seen you.
We see each other
To
every
the church.
Sunday.
Yeah, exactly. But in this setting.
Yeah.
No, it's been good. Lots been going on, and so yeah, I've been busy, and so it's good to get to connect with you guys again in this setting. But
Yeah.
I see you guys all the time. So now that Sheck Snyder is with us now,
And yeah,
Welcome
in the
back.
back
In the
there.
flesh.
back.
He did joke the other day about doing a printout of himself on the monitor there, so we can look and see him when he
Yeah.
starts talking.
Right.
yeah, so we're not trying to peek over the monitor.
I'm waiting for that their printout.
It's coming.
Yeah, I'd really appreciate that, Ben. It made me feel more comfortable in this setting.
How you been, Ben?
Doing pretty good. A little chilly outside, a little late winter creeping up.
It is brisk out there.
Yes.
So glad I didn't get my banana trees out.
Yeah.
They're in the garage still.
Banana trees. Mm-hmm. Didn't know you were growing banana trees.
I got two little pups, as they like to call them. I pulled them from Florida the last time we were there. And yeah, they're, I don't know, probably 2 foot tall. But I've got them in barrels right now.
Gotcha. When did they start producing?
Oh, if I can get them in the ground when it warms up, hopefully they start producing sometime maybe within the year.
And you said banana trees?
Mm-hmm.
Come on.
Yeah.
East Texas bananas.
Yeah.
I don't know if they'll make it the whole way here, but how do they grow? What they're not. We're not quite in the right zone, are we?
The guy in Florida told me they would be fine.
Guy in Florida, the guy selling to you, said we'll be okay.
I think Florida is a key part of that statement. Too.
Yes,
Florida man sells banana trees.
yeah,
Right.
to Texas, yeah.
Turns out to be some illicit, plant of some kind. Oh, we're not on the internet. All right. What do you want to talk about?
I mean, we can talk about a lot of things. If you Ben had said maybe we touch on a little bit of, the local or the current political environment. If we want to talk about all that,
Want to talk about religion and politics?
we can.
I think we are experienced enough to dance around it.
For sure, yeah. I'm really good at dancing around it. But
Why is that?
it's not. I think in a business environment, I've been kind of trained. This is just two things you kind of avoid in a traditional business environment, just because you don't know where people stand, and especially when I interact with a lot of people, even our customers, and I'm out with them entertaining. We just try and stay away from those two topics because you just never know. Just because our customers typically aren't based in the Bible Belt. And so there's not a 85% certainty that they've heard some of the terms we talk about or whatever it might be. And so we just never know what kind of background they have either. And so, and we deal with, huge corporations that are sometimes in the other parts of the country that are typically more liberal than are not. And so we just try and steer away from those two topics. So I've always been pretty good about steering away from those, but I have no problem talking about them at all. And so in what my view of current politics are and how they interact with religion. And I don't have any qualms about talking about that.
Yeah.
Well, and to your point, you mentioned in your workspace not talking about it, even at church. Sometimes it's hard to necessarily. I feel like I don't need to voice my opinion as much, right? Just because you don't really know where people stand.
For sure. And really, for me, politics doesn't have a bearing on what I do at the church. So whatever's going on in the current
agreed.
political world doesn't have a bearing on what that interactions with. Now, granted, there are some things that we do care about as, quote unquote evangelical Christians that are dealt with in politics and are in that political arena. But typically, we're not talking about them from stage. We're not talking about them from the pulpit. Typically,
Well, no. Also, there's trouble to be had there as well.
yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
And I'm glad we typically don't do that. Sometimes, I think there is some cultural things that I think should be addressed from the pulpit, but because they are so intertwined in how we live and then how we interact with culture around us. But those are very few and far between and have to be touched on very lightly and with a lot of graciousness. And so, but
Do you have any examples?
yeah, I think abortion is probably the most obvious one that we has been really politicized in the last probably 5 years. And then, and you see it addressed from the pulpit, but you want to address it in a way because you're not trying to heap shame on people that have had an abortion. You want them to feel comfortable, like, okay, this is a safe place for me to rebuild, or those type of things. But also, you don't want to steer away from it, like, this is not typically what we don't believe that the Lord condones this either. And so it's kind of that, kind of happy medium, like how do you address it but not heap shame on somebody? And that's a very delicate thing to walk, especially with in such a sensitive topic. But that's probably the most common example I could use for that. But there's other political things, like immigration and things of that nature that you typically don't see talked about from the pulpit and would be a little bit hard to, because there's so much context on both sides in between that, and trying to delve in that from the pulpit would be very difficult.
I don't think. You might be able to find a biblical stance on it, but it's still not something that it crosses borders. Obviously, religion crosses borders.
Sure.
So
yeah, and I think too, and from a church's standpoint, if you take a stance on that, from both sides, one, what benefit is it for you to do that, and then, but also what cost are you going to pay for taking that stance? And so it's a very kind of delicate balance of what you do with that. Even though, like I personally would probably have a very, like a middle of the road stance. I don't lean one way or the other because, it's just so complicated, and a lot of the common public doesn't know all the details, and that's why it's hard to talk about it in such generalities. Like, one side can give you stats of this particular perspective, and the other side can give you stats on this particular perspective.
Yeah.
And which one's right? Does each one have peer-reviewed literature that says my number's right? And how many reviews do you have? Do you have 4? Do I have 5? Are they all unbiased parties? All those type of things.
I think on both sides too, there's just a lot of hiding of the facts and
Oh,
not
for sure.
acknowledging of the facts.
Oh, sure.
Like, set aside like any scientific. I don't think politics are very scientific.
No.
Poli-sci is not really a thing.
No, exactly.
But yeah. Ben, what's your take?
I am middle of the road type of guy with regards to just, I lean more libertarian. I like to stand back and watch the bombs go off.
As long as you're not in the blast radius.
Right. So Trump getting elected, and then everything that he's done since has been interesting, to say the least. Ups and downs, roller coasters. It's interesting to see, just on a social media aspect, within my friends who I had no idea felt this way about, one way or the other, about Trump, just come out of the woodwork. And I'm like, oh, okay. All right. I didn't know you felt that heavily,
Even now, like after 8 years?
Yeah. It's still kind of because he's shaking it up so much, in my opinion.
Oh yeah.
I mean, but by this point, like I feel like everybody's got their stance. Like you're on one side or the other. Like nobody's on the fence about Trump.
No, I don't think so either. And I think politics to me is the one thing that most people will kind of just lose all ration for. Like they will just kind of totally disregard a lot of other things. You know, like example for Trump. I mean, you take about what he's done, but then you look at the history of his moral character, and you're like, okay, how do you hold both in tandem? You know, like is he? You know, like, I'll give myself an example. Like, am I going to be a little bit more for how he runs the country, typically from a pro business standpoint? Yeah,
From a fiscal perspective.
yeah, from a fiscal standpoint, probably so. Am I really impressed with his moral character? Not really, based on history and then based on what we know in the media, right?
But
And
as Christians, we believe people change.
exactly,
So
yeah, exactly. They have the ability to change, and that people can change. And
that's a question I would love to ask Trump if he's a Christian and how long he's been a Christian.
yeah, yeah. And even like, you know, I've got friends that like, he didn't put his hand on the Bible when he got sworn in this time. It was just to the side.
I heard that. Yeah.
And so
Saw that.
did he, you know, is he really mean it when he said, we're not going to leave our God out of the country? And I'm like, man, yeah, I mean, like you got to just fall in the faith of like, God appoints all the rulers of the earth.
Yes.
And so there is that. But what's hard sometimes for Christians is like, well, yes, if that's true for Trump, then it also was true for Biden.
Oh yeah. Yeah, of course.
And so,
then Trump before and
yeah, Obama, Bush, and you know,
Bush and
take your
Clinton,
pick.
all the way back.
Yeah. And so I think,
I believe we have the leaders we deserve
yeah,
most of the time.
yeah, yeah. And so I mean, I think that's always kind of the interesting thing for me when we look at politics. I mean, you see, to Ben's point, like I've had friends that like I had no idea felt that way about Trump, or were leaning so hard the other way, and I was like, well, wait a minute. I was like, we've been friends for like 20 years, and I would have never even guessed it. But I think that's our avoidance of conflict and authenticity, and you know those things. If you don't do life with a person, then you're not going to get into that kind of conversation.
And since these things don't really come up in church,
Right.
yeah, you just have no idea.
Yeah, exactly. So that's, you know, religion and politics is always kind of interesting to me.
Yeah. What I don't understand is how, like, you take Biden, who's lifelong Catholic but pro-abortion. Like, those are the mixes that I don't get, because
For sure.
I have a hard time seeing how you can fit abortion into the Bible, and that's why, like, largely all Christians are anti-abortion. But
Yeah.
ugh.
So I've got 3 younger brothers in our brothers chat. I've got a younger stepbrother as well. So there's 5 of us in there. And so the last couple of weeks have just been rattling off things that Elon's been doing with Doge and things that Trump's been doing, right? And I pretty much just sit back and chuckle because I could care one way or the other until I really, you know, see an effect on either my pocket or my day-to-day life. Yeah, go ahead, whatever. You know, the people who already knew about the corruption, we already knew.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like, was anyone surprised? I mean,
Yeah.
it's the government. Like,
Yeah.
there's waste everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was there before Biden too.
Of course.
I mean, it's been there for decades.
It was there through Trump's first term. It was
yeah.
there for Bush. It was, you know.
Yeah, you name it. It's always been there.
Yeah, didn't Kennedy, he formed USAID? Yeah, it was Kennedy.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's been around for 60 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what's interesting is most of these programs, good intentions, but just got, you know, off along the way, or were caught up in.
I'm not sure all of them were good intentions.
Yeah, maybe not all of
I
them.
do think there's some government institutions that didn't start with the right heart. in mind.
True. They were part of.
They may have been sold that way.
Yeah, or they were part of a legislative compromise to get something else.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's true. That's a little bit of an overstatement that all were created with good intentions. That's me assigning that most of our politicians have good intentions, which I'm an eternal optimist. So I'll say, you know,
I don't know. Can you be a politician without being a liar?
yeah, Probably not. You probably have to omit the truth, not outright lie, but you just have to skirt around issues and things of that nature. So, but I mean, and just, I mean, and I hate that because, you know, a lot of like legislative people that I've met are genuinely good people.
Of course, yeah.
But the
I think too, like the more local you are, the more easy it is to
Sure.
be honest. And then local politics matter more in
Sure.
a lot of ways than national politics.
yeah,
And get less attention.
sure, yeah. But even some of the state people that I've met, even outside of the state of Texas, I mean, it's tough because I mean you've got to have you've got to be almost extreme to stay, especially if you're going to be aligned with a party. You've got to be really hard bent.
Yeah.
There is no more moderate, a moderate Democrat or a moderate Republican or even
No.
even a moderate Libertarian if you're going to be in Ben's camp. I don't know if there is such a thing as a
They don't
moderate
have a
Libertarian.
seat at the table.
No.
Libertarians. They can't
Yeah.
win anything. Do we have any libertarians? We have a few, like federally, we have a few non-affiliated. Like
Yeah.
Bernie Trump's technically not a Democrat.
That's true.
Sorry, Bernie Sanders. Bernie Trump.
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders.
That would be an interesting combo. But what do you think, Ben? I mean, as far as
I think it's full. Well, go ahead.
No, the only reason I throw myself in the libertarian side is because I don't like either of the two. The options given every single year, it's clearly rigged to a two-party system. It's been like that for a long, long time. I think your Republicans are most of the Republicans that are in office are probably just disguised as Democrats anyway. I think the corruption in government as a whole is just, yeah, we might be looking at the end of Rome kind of days, you know, where we're just kind of believing this lie.
I mean, there certainly is a lot of similarities.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think you could draw a lot of parallels, and you know, but I think also, like I've got friends that get just super worked up about politics and you know how things are going on, and I'm like, at the end of the day, like I always ask them, how is it going to affect your everyday life? And then two, again, if you're looking for a politician or a political figure to change the world or save the USA from whatever you deem as pick your evil of the day, then you've already misaligned yourself anyways.
If you believe this is the last election.
Yeah, then we're already going down a road where we're not healthy anyways. But yeah, politics is super interesting for me to talk to people about, and just because, and even in my workplace, like I interact with just a lot of different parts of society, and it's just interesting to see people's perspective. And the media just has done us a disservice to where I mean, some things just flat aren't true. Get out there, and people are believing it. I'm like, man, where did you see that? I mean, we don't have a fact checker like Ben, in our hip pocket all the time. So, but anyways, so yeah, we can talk about politics or whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah, I don't know. Have we beaten this topic to death?
Well,
Probably not, but
yeah, no, I
well, we've beaten it to death while skirting around it.
It's skirting
constantly
around,
the whole
yeah,
time.
Right.
exactly. I've
Right,
demonstrated the skill, right?
So let me ask you this. I guess a week ago, 2 weeks ago, Trump created this task force, right? Anti-Christian bias in federal government. As a more libertarian leaning person, I'm all for less government involvement in just about everything. And so I want to see what you guys' take with regards to this potential, implications of this, more involvement, less, you know what I mean? What do you guys think about this?
Well, if it's policing of the federal government itself versus policing of the people, like I don't mind. Like I think there needs more internal auditing and policing of the government.
Yeah. And I think specifically with this one, if this is which one you're talking about, Ben, about the anti-Christian bias, I think I kind of agree with Amos. Like, I think it's good that we police the government and that we're not overreaching. But at the same time, like there is, in me personally, I mean, I like a lot of separation between church and state. And so like if I'm applying for a government grant, or a tax abatement for my business. My faith or my religious practice should have nothing to do with the way they evaluate
Correct.
the tax abatement or anything like that. It's purely on the merit of how I'm performing financially as a business or just pleading my case.
Yeah.
And so in this case, I mean, but I think it's anti-Christian here, but I would say just faith in general, whether
Yeah, I was just
Muslim
saying,
or
like, any-
anything, it should have no effect on that. Now,
Mhm.
it's easier when you're just talking about business, you're talking about numbers, but when you're talking about nonprofits that are going for grant money into the government, that's a little bit different because you're serving a particular you're trying to get to a particular group that you're serving, and that group that you're serving is going to have more passion by some politicians and some agencies and those things like that. But in general, I mean, I'm all for trying to take bias out of the government and keeping it as simple as possible.
Yeah. I do think this is a pendulum swing, though, where there was a lot of, I mean, persecution, I think, is an extreme word.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of bias against Christians in a couple administrations here.
Sure.
Anywhere from like the people who violated the FACE Act with praying in front of abortion clinics or whatever like
Yeah.
that, like going after those people hardcore, but then leaving bombings that happened at pregnancy centers alone.
Mhm.
Like we're not going to go after those people. They probably did, but it's still like there's been an outsized impact against Christians versus other groups in the prior administration.
Sure. Yeah, and I think it was just, and I think that's how government always is. You have these massive pendulum swings. And so
Yeah, but it's when you're swinging that hard,
Yeah.
the ride starts to get a little wild.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. And especially, I would say, especially over the last 15 years, like you've seen that pendulum swing really, really, really hard. And so you've seen the chaos that is created. But but I think too, like I'm 40 years old. And so when I was, Bush Senior's administration, I would say there was probably that much pendulum swing. We just weren't aware of it. And so
I kind of think, I mean, a lot of it did start with Obama when he told the conservatives, "You're taking a back seat now," after he won.
yeah.
I don't know. I got a different take on this altogether.
I mean, but I
They've been
think
corrupt
like,
for a while.
Oh, I'm not talking about corruption. I'm talking about the swinging between the
that's just
open stances.
that's
because
just to appease the masses.
I don't. Yeah, but I mean, growing up, like Bush he might as well have been a Democrat. Growing up for us,
Yeah, Bush Senior.
no,
Or
both of them,
Both of them.
both of them. He wasn't. We weren't on favor. We were not Bush people.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. See, like for me, like I had my parents didn't talk about politics at all at home. And so like for me to tell, like if you asked me what was one of Bush Senior's like big policies, would have no
Senior?
clue. Senior or even like,
so 88 to 92.
yeah, 88 to 92, or if, even the more junior Bush, I mean, if you were to ask me what was one of his key policies, I'm like,
I mean, the Patriot Act would be the big one.
yeah, the Patriot Act. But like all I would really know him for back then would be like, oh, he was, the president during 9/11.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing him on TV in the classroom when I was a sophomore in high school. And so like I have very vivid memories of him during 9/11, but because of 9/11, not because of the policies he was creating. And so like because the first election I voted in, I was in college, and I believe it was the Bush Al Gore election. 2000. Yeah. So that was like the first election that I can remember voting in myself because I was old enough at that point.
You're 40.
Yeah.
That would be 25 years ago.
I turned, no, that's not right then.
The fact it'd be Kerry Bush.
Yes. Okay. There we go. I was like, Al Gore doesn't seem right, but
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, that's the one I first remember voting in because I was at college and we all had to go to the library, and it was like this massive long line. And I was like, man, what is this? What is going on?
Everyone thought Bush was going to lose that one too. Even Bush thought he was going to lose that one.
Yeah.
And then he squeaked through.
Yeah. Because, since I went to Baylor University, which is a conservative college, it was like, get out and vote for Bush. And so, I mean, it was just kind of like, if you didn't, you were like ostracized because I was a freshman in the dorm. And so everybody was like, they were like going around and knocking on doors, say, come on, let's go vote. They were just getting everybody out there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the mentality of like I mean, it's swung. Like I know back in the 70s, there was a lot going on where it was, right versus left was big swings happening.
Sure.
Everyone was getting upset, and then it kind of cooled down after Reagan into Clinton and everything. But yeah, the mentality of like you have to vote for this party is it doesn't work right. I
Yeah.
can't find the words for it, but
Yeah, because I mean, me personally, there's not like I wouldn't call myself a Republican, like because
yeah, I wouldn't either.
because there's some things that they put on that I'm like, I don't know if I agree with all that, and so I've always been kind of like, I'm always going to try and say, okay, what does the candidate do? And that's kind of typically who.
Yeah, and they never give you good candidates.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, sometimes you're just kind of picking the best loser. It's sometimes what I feel like.
Lesser of two evils.
Yeah, lesser of two evils. Yeah. So, but Ben was kind of alluding to, I've got a totally different take on this, and I want to hear that.
Well, I mean, let's just call it what it is. After World War II, we've been
I don't think you're going back far enough.
well, okay, not going back far enough, but I guess World War II is burned, and there's definitely a psyop with regards to World War II going on in America. Democrats have been preaching, referring back to World War II, if we had done things differently, blah, 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 right? I honestly think that after World War II, just going into other countries and becoming a world dominating power, there's some sort of machine, JFK alluded to it, that ultimately has been running a lot of
military industrial complex.
Yeah.
That was Eisenhower.
JFK also
Did he? Okay, yeah. Eisenhower talked about it in his closing or his final address. Talked about the watch out for the military industrial complex.
Well, I think Eisenhower named it, but JFK alluded to it ultimately. And
then he died.
And then he died. Yeah. So, yeah, I really, I think for once again, as a middle of the road libertarian, don't care either way, gonna watch everything just crumble, and I'll prep over here, and you guys just we'll see when it all we'll see when it all cools down. I think Trump is a wild card that they just weren't expecting to come back at all.
Yeah.
And so that's been reinvigorating to watch, because he's placing all these different people and replacing heads of, departments and such. And so, like I said, what are we, 4 weeks into this election, into this presidency?
I mean, I think it does need, like, every now and then the government does need some rooting out.
Oh, for
I think
sure.
it was Jefferson who said you need a revolution every 80 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're a little overdue.
Yeah. And I mean, you got to give him credit. I mean, because he's doing something. I mean, he is moving, and he's going to do something with his time in office. The fact that he's basically trying to fire every, government employee out there is just kind of wild.
Right.
Because, and I think that's kind of where I think people are going to start feeling that at home. So I'll give an example. So for spring break, my family and I were going to go hike Zion National Park. And so Trump's about to, I think, fire a bunch of national park employees.
Yeah.
So me and Emily are talking about, okay, well, how is that going to impact our trip there? Is there going to be less people working there? Are the lines going to be longer? Will
they be closed altogether?
Or they be closed altogether? All those type of things. And so I think, for a long time, a lot of governmental policies really didn't, or the normal everyday American either wasn't aware it was affecting them because it wasn't overt enough, or it just didn't affect them, period, because it was something that was totally too big to affect the normal population. But with as much as what he's doing, that's when I think you're going to start seeing it affect people. And everybody's going to be like, oh, and now we're going to start,
Right.
Well, with
paying attention.
the national parks example, like there was a government shutdown with Obama, but they closed all the national parks.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, there are no maintenance places. Like the most you're doing there is paying for parking.
Yeah.
And beyond that, like this statue, we can't go look at the statue. We can't go look at the National Mall or the monuments or stuff like that because
Right.
there's no employees around to watch. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Prevent littering.
Yeah. Prevent littering, take out the trash,
Yeah.
all those things.
So I don't know. Like, I'm curious to see what happens. I'm definitely, we'll see what some of these. I do think that like Musk, so with Twitter,
Mhm.
what do you fire 80% of the staff when he got Twitter?
Yeah, I was close to it. Yeah.
And now they're, I believe, actually turning a profit.
Yeah.
And Twitter never turned a profit.
Right.
So like the evaluation of Twitter went up a lot. I could be wrong. Correct me on this. This is what I heard the other day.
Well, it's not Twitter anymore.
It's X.
It's X.
He'd get mad for us calling it Twitter.
That's true. Yeah.
So it's one of those things where you kind of have to give it time.
Yeah.
Which you can do a lot of damage with that time.
For sure.
But like it took 2 to 3 years for him to swing that around. And the government's, it's a slow moving ship. Like, and you want it to be a slow moving ship.
Sure.
Anyone who wants it to like move quickly, dart around like that, the only thing that moves quickly in government are totalitarian regimes.
Yeah.
Where you have one guy at the top who decides what happens and
Yeah.
cuts off heads when he wants to.
Yeah.
And he awards his buddies when he wants to, and then erases them from photos when they're no longer friends. So yeah, you got to give it time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like, the other policy that we watch from a business standpoint is, the tariffs that come into play. So especially on imports and exports, because a lot of raw materials that are used in the food industry, especially in the animal feed industry, are exported in. So a lot of people know that, and I think you can fact check this one, Ben, if you want to, but like they're like vitamins, for an example. So like vitamin C, most of them, if not all of them, come from China or Germany in the EU. I don't believe any are the raw material for vitamin C, and a lot of minerals come from the U.S. that go into the food chain. And so when you start impacting that, then you're going to see cost of consumer goods go up for a period of time. And so that's the things that we are starting to look at from a business standpoint. We see, okay, and that's what I talk about, like when the things that are going to affect the general population, whether it be consumer goods, food prices, and even the cost of building materials. So aluminum, the cost of aluminum and steel, when he's going to put the tariff on that, he hasn't said what he's going to do yet. It might be 15 or 20%. But that's significant on industrial projects, commercial projects. I mean, that's going to be huge for that because the cost of all your building materials just went up. Because we're building a factory in Colorado. And so luckily I had already pre-bought a lot of the material, the steel, copper, and those type of things. So it's not impacting me, but man, if I hadn't done that about a year and a half ago and pre-bought a lot of that and hedged that, man, it'd be a huge impact on that project.
Yeah.
Be millions of dollars. And so I think that's when I think you're going to see that. But I don't know if it's just like the 25% tariff on aluminum and steel imports. That's significant.
To play the other side, I do feel like a significant amount of cheap goods that we've been getting is America exploiting the rest of the world's cheap labor and resources. Like when you can go to China and pay people 50 cents an hour to make smartphones.
Yeah.
And then we all get our iPhone, which then comes in. I think it's $65 or something to make an iPhone.
Yeah.
And then they charge you $1,000 for it.
Right.
But that aside, I still think that like all of these cheap Chinese goods, Indian, wherever they come from, like we've been kind of living off the fat of the rest of the world.
For sure.
And I think in the long run, it also harms us because we don't make anything here. So if we do get into a global conflict of some kind where we can't get the goods we need anymore and nobody's making them here, take computer chips, for example. They're all made in Taiwan.
Yeah.
Which is this far from China.
Yeah.
What are we going to do?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good perspective. I hadn't thought about it that way, but I think that's, it's interesting. Yeah. Because that's his whole push for manufacturing domestically.
When it comes to certain raw materials, like they're only available in certain parts of the world. Like
right.
Rare earth minerals are only available in certain areas.
Yeah.
China, I think, controls most of it. So you have to get that stuff from them.
Right.
The actual manufacturing.
Yeah. Actually putting it all together.
Yeah.
and that's been interesting too, because even, you know, the immigration part of it too. I mean, that was a big thing for us recently. It's like, okay, you know, how does that impact manufacturers where predominantly, you know, you could see some illegal citizens that either are illegal now or they came into the country 20 years ago, and that was before E-Verify, a lot of the I-9 requirements of employees. And they've been law-abiding citizens, and they've been
Sure.
doing that. And then now you have the risk of deportation. But I don't think that's going to be, I don't think they're aiming for the people that haven't committed a crime since they've been here yet. And so,
So we don't. They're moving fast and breaking things. Like
Yeah.
they're going after the people who've actually committed crimes in the country first.
for sure. And we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the ripple effect of, to your point, give it time and let's see what the really ripple effect is. But I think I think Ben said, like, just the fact of how hard he's going at certain things is just, you know, just throwing everything up in the air and saying what's going to happen.
Yeah. And I mean, as Christians, it's kind of hard not to like some of the things or like, I guess it's the revenge part of things.
Sure.
Because the last administration was so pro so many values that we're not
Sure.
pro for. Like,
Yeah.
You know, like, we'll just name it, like largely in the LGBT community. And then all the transgender stuff, which is like, I don't know how you fit that into Christianity. You just don't.
Yeah.
So it's hard not to like the revenge a little bit.
Sure.
And then also the freak out from the left media.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Again, like I said, I don't think anyone in this room calls himself a Republican or stands on the far right.
Yeah.
But yeah. You know.
Yeah.
So, you probably haven't listened to it yet because it just released this morning. New episodes every Thursday. We recently had a veteran on that is going through some troubles with deportation. It was just interesting that you brought that up with regard to that, and he had a really rough time with PTSD coming back. I believe, Amos, where did he fight? In Iraq?
I believe so. I think it was 2000 to 2005, 2003 to 2005 or something.
Yeah.
I recall.
And
Yes, it would have been Operation Iraqi Freedom.
Freedom. Yeah.
Yeah, and he brought a interesting point of view with regards to the protesters that were out there, because he was out there ultimately saying, hey, he had his sign, but it was saying deportation of veterans, right?
I mean, he was clear that it was like this is not an immigration issue. This is you're deporting people who fought for this country. You know,
Right.
this country broke
Yeah.
in war, and you know those people should be ours now.
Yeah.
And if you do fight, you do or if you do serve, you do have the option to become a citizen, but you have to go through the paperwork afterwards,
For sure.
which is something that he did not do afterwards when he came out because it wasn't priority for him.
Right.
And then, you know, you're straight and clean for how many ever years, and you're a permanent resident, but that's like, oh, you committed a crime 11 years ago, 10 years ago, and so now we have to
Send you your way.
That's something he's facing right now. So yeah, if anyone wants to go support that movement, I think what is it? Hashtag honor the promise.
Honor the promise.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, it's a different perspective of like these guys fought for our freedoms, but yet they're going to get this. Said, see you later.
Yeah, and just hearing him talk about, I mean, he does a lot of community-based stuff. I think one thing that he did attend was a veterans memorial where they were hardly anybody showed up, and they were doing the anthem, you know, and he's tearing up, man. I mean, the dude fought for this country, and he's like, I really feel like a man without a home at this point, because, well, he go back and watch the episode, everybody. It was definitely an intriguing, different point of view that obviously you don't get every day, and it makes you stop to wonder, okay, are we going about this a little too quickly, too swiftly?
Well, the thing it makes it's not a racial issue. I don't think for anyone.
Right.
I don't believe there's any racial issue on the Trump side.
No, I don't
I think
think
it
so.
strictly has to do with immigration and
Yeah.
logistics and geography and, like, crossing borders illegally, all that kind of stuff. Like, it's not a racial issue.
No,
Yeah.
and I think there's a pretty heavy fiscal bent to where they're looking at the fiscal responsibility that the immigration and things that with that taxes on typically the states that are along the border.
Yes.
And so I think that's what I've heard is a more or not like when you hear Governor Abbott talk about it, or Trump, or anybody that is in a state that where they have on the southern border, they talk about the fiscal burden it is and the tax burden that it is for the state that's actually affecting it.
Yeah.
Versus, somebody like most of them probably are not going to go to North Dakota. One, because it's stinking cold up there, but two,
Hey. North Dakota's a nice place.
it is a nice place. It is a nice place.
In the summer.
In the summer, yeah, what we're used to. But maybe that's maybe a direction we could go, like the church, like in how we should interact with politics. In like y'all's opinion,
Well, we keep saying this middle of the road thing, but like Jesus said, like if you're, be hot or cold, and if you're lukewarm, I'll spew you out of my mouth. Like that's where I like when we talk about being middle of the road with politics. I'm like, it may not fully align there with the analogy, but I do think that God's saying like you need to pick a side. Like,
yeah, and I think so let's talk about like like I think it's Revelation 1, 2, and 3 when he's specifically talking to the churches, and he goes through you've done these things, but I have this against you. And really, if you read all 7 churches, there's a pretty big commonality. It's stay from sexual immorality and do the things I told you to do. And then I think he only says once, don't be lukewarm. And I can't remember which church he's saying that to. But I think to all 7, he says, stay from sexual morality, or alludes to it. And then I think in all 7, he says, remember what I told you to do and do what I told you to do, or I'll remove your lampstand. He only says that, I think, one time. And Ben can check me. I'm overgeneralizing, a pretty big chunk of scripture there.
Yeah.
And I think, in my opinion, what he's alluding to is like when he says lukewarm, here's the tenets of the faith. So don't be lukewarm about those things. Now, when we talk about politics, if we're talking about fiscal politics and taxes and things of that nature, I don't think he's applying it there because he's very clear, give to Caesar what's Caesar's, and then you do right. But when I think he's talking about, LGBTQ, abortion, those things, yeah.
And I also think a lot of it's the type of churches we have nowadays where it's like, we believe come as you are, but then you have churches out there that are like stay as you are kind of mindset. And like you do need to change, you need to grow in Christ, you need to if you love me, you keep my commandments.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's where I think from the everyday church, and I think this is where sometimes church is caught into, we're worried about, are people going to leave my church when I take this stance? Are we going to be known as that church? Are we going to be known as the political church? Because that has a very negative connotation now. If you're a politically charged church, it has a very negative connotation.
Yeah, and also if you're too political, you lose your 501c3 status.
Exactly.
Which also is kind of like, is government buying out the churches, so they'll shut up.
So they won't speak against us, right? But I think that's where I think there's certain issues that Jesus is alluding to there that we are hot on. We're not one way or the other, but there are certain issues that I don't think bear any weight within the church, like taxes and those type of things that have no moral boundary that he's in conflict with.
I love that you brought up Revelations, and this is so poignant. This is Revelations 3:15 starting out here. I know thy works, that thou art neither hot or cold nor hot. Thou wert cold or hot. So then, because thou art lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will spew thee out of my mouth. Because thou sayest, I am rich and increase with goods and have need of nothing. Sound like something we know? And knowest that thou art wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked.
Yeah. I started rereading through Revelation over the last 2 weeks, just because I felt like, there's so much talk about, man, the end is near. It is, and I mean, we could
People have been saying that for 2,000 years.
exactly, and so I mean, we could debate it either way, and I would take the stance that some would say that Revelation is meant to be interpreted for times, specific things, and the way events will happen. I would take a different posture where it's meant to say, ultimately, Christ wins, and it's an encouragement to the church in whatever season the church is in. So like when in this particular church, they were being persecuted by Rome, and they were literally throwing Christians into pits of lions and watching them get ripped apart.
Yeah.
We don't see that in the U.S.
No, that's why when we say like they say they're persecuting Christians, like that's a strong word.
That's a very strong
Like there's
word.
been some very strong persecution throughout history.
Yeah.
Of Christians and all religions. We're not seeing that here
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that,
yet.
And I think, is that right, Ben? It was just to the Laodiceans is where he says lukewarm.
Yeah.
Okay. But I think it's interesting, and that's kind of what I went back and reading, because I in this stage of church and and I say Big C church, not our local church, is like, where are those missteps? What are those commonalities that Jesus is saying? If you're going to be my church, here's what I want you to stay away from. Or don't do this, but this is what I want you to do. But and that's when I when I read through the first 3 chapters, I'm like, he's saying, do what I already told you to do. And if you stay to that, then it's not simple, but it becomes a whole lot easier versus, when we think about the rest of the book of Revelation, you've got people trying to interpret, well, does 7 mean this? Am I an amillennialist? Am I pre-trib? Am I post-trib? Is there really a rapture or is there not? You get all into that minutia, and I'm like, in the end, Christ wins anyways. So whether Christians do go through tribulation or they get raptured before the tribulation, doesn't really matter.
Yeah. And he also says only the Father knows the hour.
Exactly.
So it's like you're not going to know when this stuff's going to happen.
Yeah, you're not going to interpret all this.
Be prepared.
Yeah.
Because he comes as a thief in the night.
Right.
So you have to have your heart right.
Yeah.
But after that, you kind of have to just live your life.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think and that's kind of why I started studying it again, just because I'm like, I want to, like I'm passionate about what we do at our church. And I think, like I feel like we're kind of like at the cusp of something new, and like we're pushing again. And I'm seeing a lot of, and you guys may feel the same way, but I'm hearing more stories and of true legitimate life change. And I'm like, okay, I don't certainly want that to stop. And so I just kind of felt compelled to like, okay, Jesus warns the churches what not to do. And certainly I don't want our lampstand to be pulled from it. And we want the favor of the Lord always. But just like, man, we have a big opportunity. And so I don't want to squander that opportunity. And so that's kind of why it kind of led me into Revelations. And like I feel like the Lord just kind of put it on me to say, read this and I'll tell you what it looks like. So it's just interesting.
Very interesting.
So what is that opportunity, you think?
I truly think that we reach a population we say, come as you are, and we challenge in a way where there's true physical change. And what I mean by that is that the kingdom of God is physical and it manifests in people's lives. It's tangible. It's not head knowledge. It's not just learning the scriptures, which is a good thing, and it's not just doing the right things, but there's physical life change, meaning that marriages are restored. People are literally coming out of bondage of addiction, drug addicts, people that have been, addicted to, several things. They're physically coming out of it, and they're not having relapses. Is my point. And I think there's an opportunity for us that we're starting to see that. And I think there's an opportunity that we can have a massive impact in our local community but at the same time, it comes with a little bit of uncomfortability. And that's not probably any word, it's just discomfort. Because I think, especially because the beliefs that we do believe that God still heals, that He does speak, and that He can truly impact your life. Not that and the church would disagree with that, but we have no problem praying for the sick in church. We have no issues with talking about prophecy from the stage, and that that it's a good thing, is to build up the church. I feel like that's just, we're in a season where that people are more open to that. I've seen people that historically probably I would not peg to say I'm okay with that. They're just more open to it because I think they've tried everything else and nothing else is working. So like I had a pastor a long time ago say, sometimes you gotta be miserable enough to change. And I think some people are like, man, I've looked everywhere else and it's not getting any better. So what do I got to lose?
So if things were 10% worse, then you'd change your life. So maybe you'd be better off if things were worse in your life. So you'd make a change.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, even like as we're talking about politics and what that looks like, I think we've got the opportunity to give the perspective that this is how we view politics in this way. This is how we view what's going on. And we can have a very poignant view, and we shouldn't steer away from that. There's a guy that I've watched a couple times on YouTube. He's a pastor in Atlanta. I can't remember his name to save the life of me now. But they have a fairly big church, and he just goes at people. I mean, he is not afraid, and he just goes at cultural issues. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. But he's pretty good at saying, okay, here's what Jesus talks about that. And this is pretty evident in our culture. And he's going to go at it. And he gets a lot of flack for it. And he's not typically the person that I would like, yeah, I'd listen to you. But something about his message just kind of strikes me. And I'm like, I love the authenticity and you're not backing down. And that's just, I think that's what kind of, I'd watched a couple of sermons and I'm like, something's in me that's kind of, and I just, like, in my prayer time, I feel I always kind of always hear like, hey, why don't you read Revelations? I feel this like pushing to that. And that's not typically where I would land when I, like in my morning scripture readings, I typically land in Psalms, Proverbs, or something else like that. But
how do you pick?
I mean, a lot of times it's with what's going on in my life, but I have a pretty rigid time in the morning with my time in the Lord, and how I walk through prayer and how I walk through preparing for the day, and the Psalms fit that pretty well. But this kind of, I feel like there's been this urging to kind of get out of that, and so like I started with Revelation, and then I was even reading a passage in Micah this morning because I'm doing kind of another study with my wife about humility. There's this guy that was a mentor, or I guess his mentor was Michael Heiser. And so when Michael Heiser passed away, he was kind of the guy that was kind of in the same vein as Michael Heiser. I think his first name is Joel, but I can't remember what it is. But I've been reading his book on, I think that's it right there. Yeah, The Hidden Peace. Yeah, that's the book that I started reading, and it's really, it's an interesting thing about, we don't talk about humility a lot, and that's especially when you talk about, we are so big on identity, and so who you are in Christ, what God thinks about you, but it can almost be like, if we're not careful, it can be, look at me. There becomes a pride aspect into it. And his book, The Hidden Peace, is really about a Christian superpower really is humility. You have to be brought low into in order to see some of your true purpose in the Lord. And he's like a super theologian, like super studied guy. And so he was actually on Blurry Creatures podcast.
Yes, he was.
And so my wife listens to Blurry Creatures, and she said, this guy it really captivates me when he talks about it. And so we got his book, and so I just started reading it this morning. And it's a very approachable way of talking about humility. And one of his passages that he uses was in Micah, and I was like, I haven't read Micah in forever. And just the passage that he used, I was like, oh man, even in that is saying, okay, this is what we should do, and this is how we should pursue the Lord. And so that's a long way of rounding about of, I feel like we've got this opportunity in this season of our church to see some real life change and to kind of maybe move down a different way where we were previously, that I think could be wildly impactful for our city. And then just, and I think for men, that has been kind of on my heart lately about just reestablishing biblical manhood. What are men like, trying to say that they are getting across to me like, man, a relationship with the Lord is really valuable. And it's not that if you go to church, you got to wear skinny jeans, which was very typical, like, I don't know, 5 years ago.
Have to wear skinny jeans?
Yeah, you have to wear skinny jeans. Like, yeah, I mean, I don't fit in those things.
I'm not sure I'd go to that church.
But like, that was the quote unquote typical Christian was he was at a coffee shop, which I love coffee shops, but and you had a flannel shirt with a beanie on, and you had your skinny jeans. Yeah, you had a hipster. Thank you, Ben. There's a more common word. And that, I mean, and so like when you've got, I mean, I would say all three of us are pretty similar. Like we're fairly like, like we like to do things by ourselves. We can build things, we're pretty self-reliant. And then when that type of man that liked hunting, liked being outdoors, worked in manufacturing or whatever, would walk into a Christian church, they'd be like, and they'd look at the other men and hear like, man, I don't know if I fit in here. If this is what faith is, does it mean I have to change? Can I still like hunting? Can I still work with my hands? Can I still do all these things? And so,
do you have a particular church you're talking about? Because I don't think I've interacted with this one.
No, I mean, I think just if you, in my experience with some of the mega churches,
let's get with mega churches. I've normally always been around like the Firebrand, small churches, which were very country. Mm-hmm. So,
but I think even like local churches, like if you look at college ministry, now some of it may just be the culture and the time that we're in, because obviously, when we started out, we had a huge college ministry. Like it was massive. It was like half of our church when you came in here. Like half of it was college students. So I felt like when I was walking in and I would see a guy that I would know from work or, and interact with the community, they come into our church and like, man, there's a bunch of hipsters in here. I don't know how I feel about that. And so they immediately feel out of place. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying we cater to that, but I think it's not, I want to get past the wardrobe and say faith in the Lord and in a real interaction with the Lord is truly valuable as a man. Mm-hmm. And it will truly change your life in all facets. And I think that's the big thing that the church is missing is men that want to lead and want to know and love the Lord. And so I think like all that kind of, you look what politics has done to manhood. You're real extreme, and it's been defining what a man is subversively for a long time. And then you've seen the extremism of like, okay, if I'm on this side of the aisle, I'm extremely tolerant, and I should be almost like women should be held high. I should be submissive to my wife almost, and so I shouldn't lead my family. And it's okay if I stay home, and it's okay. Not that that's a bad thing, but it's it's just that subversive thinking. And then on this side, you are almost women are undervalued, and it's a dominating thing. Mm-hmm. And so we talked about the middle of the road, and I don't think Christianity is the middle of the road. I think it's just very specific of what Christ wants us to do.
Finding balance.
Yeah, it's finding balance, right? And so it's a long way of saying, I think there's a real opportunity for us, not only as a church, but in how we impact men. Because without that, I mean, the church will never be what it's supposed to be. We won't ever be able to advance the kingdom in a way without men where they need to be.
Sure.
Predominantly you look at people who lead ministries, they're typically women. And, you typically, you guys are actively involved in kids ministry because, hey, you're doing hall monitor.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
occasionally.
Occasionally.
I'm a sub.
Yeah. But hey, that's, and Shaq Snyder is super involved in kids. whether by choice and sometimes forced, but because I'm an old kids pastor's husband, so. But I think that's really, you see a massive change when a dad's in the room in kids ministry versus when it's not.
Yeah.
When you've got kids that are having a hard time, they respond differently to a male versus they do a female, and you see that.
There's that statistic that what is it? Children that are in single mother households have like a high criminal rate when they grow up, and then when as opposed to children in a dual parent home.
Yeah.
The children who have a single father home have the same criminal rate as the dual parent home.
Yeah.
Which and it's nothing against mothers, because you need mothers, but it's like men instill authority.
Yeah.
Respect for authority.
Yeah.
And good behavior.
Yeah.
It comes from fathers.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we have the opportunity to truly, it's for our kids, we get to show we have the opportunity to see what God's like. So like my son will view his Heavenly Father based on his experiences with me. It'll shade what that looks like. And so whether we're overly harsh or we're passive, he will glean some view of our Heavenly Father based on his experience with us. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's why I typically, like, I'm kind of fairly passionate about, like, even like on a couple times I've gotten to MC, I'm always going to try and kick up kids ministry, and I'm always going to try and point at the dads, like, hey, we need you. It's we need the men. Not to your point, women are great, and we need them too. And some things they're better at than we are.
Well, they're nurturing.
Yeah,
I'm sure the kids who grew up with a single father household felt a lot less loved.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's something missing in their lives, but they're not in jail.
True.
Less likely to be in jail.
True. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, and that's just all that is just kind of where I think, we have an opportunity in our community to really change some things, because, like even men's night. Monday night, or not this past Monday, but maybe 2 nights.
So first, second Monday of every month?
Yeah. Like they had 18 guys there. So, I mean, getting 18 guys on a Monday night after work is pretty good. Some people are like, well, we wanted 100 there. I'm like, man.
That'd have been a lot.
Yeah. 5 years ago, we may have gotten 1. We didn't have a men's ministry. We didn't have that. And now they're seeing 18. That's you're seeing there is a hunger by men to have an authentic relationship with the Lord. And it's not, it's even like when we tell people, like, you should write in a journal. Like that has, for a lot of us, like writing in a journal has a feminine quality to it. Like that's what I used to make fun of my sister for. Like I go steal her journal just to make her mad. And so like, that's, trying to put a perspective on what manhood really is and what being a man that loves the Lord really is. And I think Terrell does a great job of that, but I think there's an opportunity for us there that we can either walk into in a big way, or we can kind of be passive, but it just requires effort, just like anything else does. Mm-hmm. So that's my little soapbox for today.
Hey, Josh, do you have sisters?
I do. I have one older sister.
Older sisters. Amos, you got sisters, right?
Yeah. 4.
I don't have any sisters. I have stepsisters after the fact. I grew up and my mom remarried, and he had a couple daughters. I've never really thought about journaling in that way before.
That it was feminine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look throughout history, like the men were the ones who journaled.
Right. Yeah.
And then when you got to the, 80s, 90s, it was a movie trope.
Yeah.
Dear diary.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, like even that, you see how pervasive that's been in American culture. And it's probably just an American culture thing that's been somewhat pervasive. And just those things and how media and all those things we get fed are so pervasive, and it's made this shift in culture to where I would think, I'm not going to journal. I was like, that's something my sister did. She had a pink flowery journal that she used to write in that I'd steal all the time. But now, like, it is the most, like, it's the thing that I don't miss in the morning. Like I will wake up early to write in my journal, spend time with the Lord. Like writing is something that relieves my thoughts. It's for my mental health. I mean, on the days that I don't do it, it's a dramatic shift.
So what kind of things do you fill your journal with?
A lot of it is it's kind of like I'm praying through the Lord as I'm writing. And so, I mean, obviously it's pretty rudimentary to where I start out with Thanksgiving. Like, I'm going to thank the Lord for all the things that he's done in the last 24 hours, just to kind of, when you wake up, you can sometimes, for me, if I see like 80 emails in the morning, I'm like, man, it's going to be one of those days. And you immediately get into a mindset like it's going to be a hard day. And so, one, being thankful, the first thing is like, okay, there are very good things. And it just kind of gets me outside my 3-foot world. Like, the world is not just right here. And then it's simply reminding myself of his character. Like, I've got this hard thing, but you were faithful back here because you've always been faithful. And you were kind to me here because you've always been kind. And reminding myself of his character. And then simply it is, here's what my day looks like. I've got all these meetings, I've got these big tasks. And Lord, but I need to trust you with them. Because if I put them in my hands and try and take control, it might go okay, but it can also go really bad because I have a perspective that I can't see. I have a human perspective, and he may have a perspective that he can see in a big way. And so a lot of it's just me surrendering in humility, like, hey, just like my son, like, we've been talking about following Jesus. And like he kind of committed his life earlier, but he never got baptized. And now he's like, Dad, I just, just sorting through all of it, as any kid does. And, me, like, as a father, I'm like, oh, I want to get this done. I want to wrap this up. Like, I want this thing to be secured. But me having to say, like, Lord, you love him way more than I can possibly imagine, and way more than I do. And so I'm literally going to trust you that you'll guide me to have interactions with him. But I trust you that you're walking with him and you're going to reveal yourself to him. And that's kind of what that's what it would look like. Or if I've got a meeting at work, like, hey, I need you to bless me with wisdom today to see the perspective from you. I'm going to go into a meeting with a difficult person versus me seeing them the way they are. Would you give me a perspective of how you see them in the moment and beforehand? And so I'm literally going through my calendar, what's going on today, and I'm literally walking through each one of those. And whatever pops into my mind, I'm writing down, and I'm saying, okay, I trust you with that. I trust you with that. And because of my, my history with anxiety and things of that nature, it keeps me really mentally healthy. If I don't do it, man, I can get in my head real quick and start spinning in a heartbeat. And so, I mean, that's just typically what it looks like. And really that's something that Garth Hens taught me, almost more than a decade ago. We had a mutual friend that kind of taught us how to, just taught us that kind of sequence. And it comes out of Psalm 100. And so, I mean, that's just something that I do every morning. And if I didn't do it, man.
Yeah. Be a basket case?
It would be a basket case, yeah. And my wife would attest that to it. And even, I think my son would too, like, because he usually wakes up early and he comes, like, he'll sit with me in our kitchen, either while I'm finishing up or while I'm doing that. And so it's just, one, it's just another way to model to him, like, this is a good thing.
Yeah.
This is worth getting up for. So
yeah, certainly leading by example.
Yeah, because I think as dads, if you kind of just nail them all the time, you say it, but you're not doing it.
Yeah.
They can see right through it. Even at, my son's 11 now. He certainly can see it now, but even like when he was, 4 and 5, they see that too. So, but Ben's looking up some scripture over there.
How long have you been consistently doing that?
Probably at least over 10 years.
Okay.
And so, like, to your point, like, 2 starts out, serve the Lord with gladness and come in the presence with singing. And so, and then it says, enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise, and be thankful unto him and bless his name. So what I picture is kind of the way the temple looked. You would enter the first gates, and then you would enter the inner courts, and then you had the Holy of Holies. So it's kind of a progression, what I would call a progression into interacting with his presence. So Thanksgiving, one, is putting my 3-foot world in a perspective that he can go into. I put it in a bigger perspective. And then praise is like, man, I'm just trying to remember how big you are and how way consistent you are, how thankful I am. And even, Holy Spirit will bring to mind attributes that for that day. Like, man, you realize how consistent he's been, and thanking him for how consistent he's been. He'll bring back memories of these things where he was consistent, and that's what begins to pull that praise up. And then, but typically what you see, in the temple, like, once you get past that point, then there's sacrifice. And so when I talk about trust, that's what I mean. You're at the altar and you're laying that down, and whatever the Lord wants to do with it at that point, that's what trust looks like. Because you can put something at the altar and either he's going to burn it up completely into ashes, or he will refine it and burn out the impurities and be left with something. And so that's kind of the mental imagery that I have when I walk through that. And that's kind of where Psalm 100 that's where it kind of pulls from.
Yeah.
And so that's just been a practice. It wasn't something I created, but something that I was taught, and then just has been super impactful for me for a long, long time. And I've gotten to teach that to a lot of people, and it's, it's been impactful for a lot of people because it's just a good grounding, just kind of a reset.
I think it gets you out of your own head.
Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest problems we have is forgetting.
Mm-hmm.
Like human nature is to forget
Mm-hmm.
what the good, especially when things are going bad.
Mm-hmm.
And then also when things are really good, you also forget what
Yeah.
was done for you when things were bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I'm interested in on that study, The Hidden Peace. He talks about when things are really good, that's when pride comes in. And you forget that the humility is that, man, without the Lord, nothing works. Because even like, I don't think he references this, but in my mind it pops up like Christ holds all things in existence simply by the power of his word. So that means everything that exists is simply held together by that. And so that perspective for me, like, oh, and I can forget that, to your point, really easily. I think I can control a lot of things. But trying to keep that perspective, it's a grounding thing for me. So when I deal with difficult people or whatever it might be, I can say, yep, I can be in that place. But to your point, it's a great thing just to get me outside my 3-foot world.
Define humility.
Oh man.
Because it's a word we use a lot, but doesn't get defined a lot.
So I think I'm going to pull out my phone if that's okay.
Well, Ben pulled it up there. We can look at Google's definition.
Yeah.
A modest or low view of one's importance, humbleness.
Yeah. I think, so maybe I define it a little bit differently. I think when we hear humility and in that definition, we are supposed to think less of ourselves.
Exactly. That's that's one problem I don't like with the common definition.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what it is we're supposed to think of ourselves less often, not think of ourselves less. So still living from a place of identity, but realizing that because my identity is secure in what God has already done in me and for me and who I am, now I can be less focused on self and be focused on others.
Exactly.
And because I think if you look, and I think he even mentioned this in the book, like we're not made to receive glory and to receive praise, because it becomes toxic when we do. And I think we've talked about that on a couple other podcasts. Like one of my things was seeking the praise of man almost to an idolatrous level. Like I would be just completely crippled if somebody thought, man, I wasn't doing the right thing or I was thought of differently. It was crippling, and I would do everything like that to make sure I did that. But I mean, I think that's truly what I would define. We're thinking of ourselves less because our identity is secured. And we're humbled, we're in humility because we realize we did nothing. And we had someone that found us, and God found us so valuable that he did what he did to bring us back into relationship, even though what Adam and Eve did to put us back, and we said, no, we're okay. But he said, okay, And I think that's the posture that true humility looks like. We're centered and we're okay because of what God did in us. So now we can go do what he tells us to do and give him the rightful praise and glory. But we can think of others, and others being God and other people.
Yeah. And how you view others.
And how
Because
you
if
view
you look at other people as less than you,
Right.
that's not humility. But it's also not good to look at people as more than you either.
Right. Yeah.
So you put other people up on pedestals, or you get jealous, or you try to attain that.
Yeah.
That's not good for your mental health either.
No. Yeah. And simply you're viewing people as they are an image bearer, whether they follow Jesus or not, they bear the image of our Creator. So intrinsically, they are worthy of being treated with value and respect. And so if we view people that way, then we're going to approach them much differently, whether they have a differing viewpoint or not. But in the moment, if you and me are going at it, it's very difficult to say, okay, got to remember that you're an image bearer too, Amos. That's very difficult. And so you've got to create yourself a posture where, one, you realize that you're an image bearer and that you didn't pay for it and you didn't come that way. And that helps deal with that.
Yeah.
So,
but like from a businessman's perspective, it's also not, you're not setting aside pragmatism.
right.
You're not, people still need to be viewed for their accomplishments inside that world.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not going to build anything.
Right. And I mean, I think even in that viewpoint of humility, I think is an essential part of being a leader in business. If you cannot see your team's accomplishment over your own, and to where you're saying, like we had a shutdown when we were doing some big maintenance this past Wednesday. So every Wednesday we shut down, we clean, we do some big preventative maintenance in our facility. And we had 2 new guys that had been with us for like maybe 4 or 5 weeks, really skilled craftsmen, welders, fabricators that are really skilled. And they had a big job. It's one of our critical pieces of equipment. If it doesn't go well, we're down. And it's not good. And so they prepped. They did it. I mean, they beat their time frame by, like they said, it'll take us 14 hours, and they did it in 12. And so I mean, they were just massively successful. And so like I made it a point, like, these are new guys. I said, hey, I'm going to go find them and just thank them for what a great job they did, and say, hey, you guys really did a great job. Thank you guys for being prepared and being very specific about what they did. And I mean, one guy that's only been with us for 2 weeks, he's like, his eyes just kind of lit up and said, man, thank you so much. And I mean, if you can't, and that's like, if you can't do that as a leader out of humility and recognizing somebody's accomplishment, you won't be successful. You may be successful, but no one will want to work with you. They'll just work with you because they have to. And so, I mean, that's like, I think humility is probably one of the biggest skills that a leader in business has to do.
I mean, the captain's only as good as his crew.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because I mean,
but the captain picks the crew.
Yeah. Captain picks the crew for sure. But sometimes, I mean, the captain doesn't pick its crew. So when we've got a facility that has 90 people, your captains are picking their crew. But I mean, it's a huge deal for me in business. So sorry, I'm kind of passionate about treating people with respect.
Let's go where you're passionate about.
See, you guys always work me that way. No, I just think treating people as a human is just like when I get to walk, I mean, I'm an upper level executive, and when I walk on the factory floor, I mean, there are base level line employees. But when I look, I'm like, man, without you, it doesn't happen. Like, I can't go down there and I can press a button and I can do every single task that these people can do. Now, have I had to do those tasks before? Absolutely. But can I go do everyone as good as they can? Absolutely not. And so because I believe they have intrinsic value and they were created in the image of God, I'm going to try and know their name and say hello when I walk through the factory. It's a huge deal for that employee because they know they're not just a number. They're not just swiping their time card and punching in. Yeah. Because, let's be honest. I mean, manufacturing jobs, it's thought of as an undignified job. Where
it's not a white-collar job.
It's not a white-collar job. 40 years ago, I mean, a manufacturing job was a dignified, you could do a career there. And that's really, as we open up another factory in Colorado, that's what I'm really passionate about, is making sure that a manufacturing job is not just a stop or a stepping stone. It can be a career. If you're willing to work hard and maybe not be so glamorous, you can make great money, a great living.
Well, there's certainly a move in the culture now where people are longing for,
Sure.
like, why can't we just live like it was in the 60s where
Mm-hmm.
you graduated from high school and maybe went to college and then you went and got a
Yeah.
career with a pension
Yeah.
in manufacturing for the next 40 years.
Yeah.
And you could afford a house and 2 cars and a wife
Sure.
and home and you were all good.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we had this movement in the 90s that everybody had to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
And, then we had student debt and all that kind of stuff.
You think big college sold us that?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there was a subversive thing that was trying to sell that, the big machine. We'll call it the big education machine. not the
Yeah,
one.
for sure.
But I mean, I think that's if like there's just great people that I work with. I mean, that's what I think I love what I do because it's not that I love making pet food. It smells. It's hot, but
You're not passionate about pet food.
I'm not passionate about pet food.
Maybe we shouldn't say that because you're an upper level executive with pet food. But
No, but I mean, but I'm more passionate, and I love the people that we work with.
yeah.
Because I mean, they're
But pet food is a necessity too. Like
It is.
I mean, everything you're producing is like it's there because there's a large market for it that's needed.
sure, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's essential business, and so, but I mean, I think the fact that when you validate somebody's hard work, I mean, it's like you could have given them $1,000, but that word that you just gave them was worth more than that $1,000 in that moment. And so that's like what I've always been passionate about is trying to know people's name on the factory floor and trying to connect with them when I can. Say, hey, how's your wife? She was sick. How's she doing? Hey, your kid's playing football for Knack High School. Saw in the paper like that he, had so many yards or whatever. If you can do that, you create culture and you create loyalty. They say, man, this company tries to treat me like a human, even though I know like there's the big economics, like we're manufacturing, we have slim margins. And so we're looking for pennies, we're always trying to squeeze the penny because there's not really dollars.
Yeah.
But hopefully all the pennies add up to $1.
Yeah. And that's the thing that, like, on the other side of the culture, people don't realize the anti-billionaire crowd, the anti-corporate crowd, where like the margins are so slim, and and America doesn't run without these systems.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think, for a lot of people, if you went into where their meat was processed, like the steak that you get, the chicken breast that you get in the store.
Steak comes from the grocery store.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's where it comes from.
Yeah. It's just these.
They make it in back.
Yeah. They just appear.
Yeah.
But a lot of people like it. I think that's, in the, the 40s, 50s, and 60s, typical people were a lot closer to where their food came from because they were typically, off of farms or whatever had to. We've gotten so far from that. People, I think, would just be shocked, like, oh, this is how my food is made.
Yeah.
These are the people.
And also, it was a lot prettier back then too.
Yeah.
When you're closer to it, whereas when you get to like large factory meat
Oh, yeah.
production, it's pretty
It's gruesome.
gruesome.
Yeah. 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 A lot of people I've talked to that we either take them into a rendering facility or whatnot. They won't eat like chicken for like 3 or 4 weeks after they've gone in there, because they're like, I didn't know how that was done. And it's pretty interesting to see that. Now they don't become outright vegans because like they come back to it a little bit like, it's okay. But
Well, you know what the most ethical meat you can eat is, right?
what's that?
Beef. Because the least number of animals die to produce the most amount of meat.
That's true. Yeah, it's a much bigger animal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of chickens. You have to kill a lot of chickens to get the same weight in meat as a cow.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, but
And beef's healthier for you than chicken.
Yeah.
Too.
yeah, I like beef more than I do chicken.
That may be a controversial opinion, but yeah,
it's
beef is.
It's all right.
Did you guys know that we almost had hippos in the United States?
Hippos?
Like as a meat product?
Yes. In 1910, Congressman Robert Bouchard proposed importing hippos from Africa to address a meat shortage and an invasive water hyacinth problem. Some sort of weed or something was growing down in Louisiana, and he proposed to Congress to bring in hippos. So it's funny you say cows being the most humane when we could be eating hippos.
They should have imported. They could have imported giraffes.
Yeah.
Giraffes would actually be clean from a biblical perspective.
I don't think they would do that good in the bayou though.
Hippos.
No,
the
giraffes.
Well, yeah, you're. But like we bring invasive species all the time. I'm not sure of a time that it worked.
Yeah.
Besides humans.
Yeah.
being the invasive species, but because like nutrias, they brought nutrias in
Nutria rats,
from
yeah.
South America
Yeah.
to eat the vegetation, and now they're everywhere.
Oh yeah,
Everywhere.
Fire ants, I believe, too, are also an import.
they are. Yeah,
Yeah.
They decimated the quail population.
Fire ants?
So like you typically don't see any wild quail in Texas anymore, simply in the Panhandle, because the fire ants will eat all the eggs, and so they've really decimated the wild quail population. And so, just an example of that. But that was a random place to go, Ben.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I appreciate that though.
What does hippo taste like?
I have no idea.
I mean, yeah, that would be very, very weird.
Kind of like a giant pig, probably.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
Depending on what it eats a lot of vegetables, probably. I don't know if they're a herbivore or they eat.
No, they're strictly plants.
Okay.
Yeah.
Unless
So
they're
like pigs will eat anything. Hippos are
yeah.
like you see them. They'll feed them melons and stuff, but they primarily eat like underwater vegetation.
Okay.
And stuff like that.
Okay.
I believe
Yeah.
Omnivores.
they're omnivores.
Omnivores, really?
No. What kind of meat do they eat?
Dude, hippos are the most dangerous creatures in Africa.
because they're territorial.
But they will.
They don't eat people. They're not going to eat a person.
They're going to eat some meat. Yes, hippos will occasionally eat meat.
Really, in animal carcasses, fruits and other animals. Wow.
But why hippos eat meat? Food scarcity and scavenging.
Exactly. Yeah. They're
It's-
not doing it under normal circumstances.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're hyper territorial. So like if you're in the water biome, they're going to take you out.
Oh, yeah,
They're
for
not
sure.
gonna eat you.
Yeah.
What does the Old Testament, what would that qualify with regards to clean or unclean?
Hippos would be unclean because they do not split the hoof. I don't think they chew. Do they chew cud? They might chew cud. But they have like I believe it's a 4-point hoof,
Kind of like an elephant.
and like a camel too.
Yeah.
No, an elephant. No, an elephant has like that stomp. That
Yeah.
like,
Big
trunk.
stump. Yeah.
Yeah, and they have 5. Whereas a hippo is kind of more like a. I believe it's a 4-point hoof. But yeah, they would definitely not be clean. Let's look at that face.
Yeah. There.
Have you ever seen the image where like if you made if we didn't know what hippos look like and all you had was a skull, what they would like, kind of how we interpret dinosaurs.
Uh-huh.
We find their skulls and we interpret this way. If you interpret a hippo without any fat on it, it looks like some kind of fantasy creature. Hold that one up, Ben.
I could believe that.
Yeah.
Hippo as a fantasy creature?
No, like a hippo. Say a hippo if a paleontologist found it, something like that. No. There you go. Yeah, that one right. That no over to your left, just a little bit. Middle, top.
One up.
The one with the red skeleton. Yeah, right there. That one.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what a hippo would look like if it.
Yeah, it looks like a couple like. Yeah, that would not be fun to run across.
That is interesting.
But we have those in real life, and they're also not fun to run across.
Yeah, no doubt.
Sorry for that.
That aside.
It
That
was a
little
good tangent,
aside,
man. I
that was
liked
good
it. I liked it.
We like to have fun here.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys are fun.
What's your take on? Well, I guess the negative aspects toward business that we have kind of in our culture right now toward big business.
I mean, I think there are some necessary evils that it creates, and I say necessary evils, not meaning the business kind of creates it. Not that it's necessary to run it doing that. Let me distinguish that.
Like, does Jesus believe in necessary evils?
No, I don't think they're that at all. But I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't know how to address, even when I think about the necessary evils of big business. I mean,
like, what would be one of the necessary evils?
that I think in order to increase profit, sometimes businesses have to turn down quality to make the profit to meet investor standards. So if you're a publicly traded company and you do quarterly earnings, if your stock price drops, one way to do that, like, well, I need to increase revenue to make my price go up and stay where quarterly earnings are. But how do I do that? Well, typically I've got to be more competitive on price to drive sales. So the way I do that, either I invent some new technology that produces the same product at the same quality, just a new way, or I find this balance where my quality is going to suffer just a little bit, but my input cost is a little bit lower. So everything kind of moved down. Is it harmful? Maybe, maybe not.
I don't think it's good for the consumer.
It's not good for the consumer.
And is it good for the brand long term?
Is it good for the brand long term? Right. And so I think big business, when you get to that kind of level, you're having to be put in that situation because you're slave to the market, not to the actual consumer. Because if we were just focused on the consumer, we'd say, okay, we'd make a quality product at a competitive price. But when you're subject to earnings, for example, when a company has a lot of debt on their books and they're cash flowing their business, they're subject to the quarterly earnings, because if their stock price goes down, then your investors that are investing into your business that kind of creates some of your cash flow, that cash flow begins to turn down. And so I think that's one of the things that happens when big business, if you're publicly traded, you're subject to quarterly earnings, and that's your slave versus the consumer. Now, if you have like a massive product recall or whatever, it kind of puts things back into a little bit more balance, but you're still slave to the quarterly earnings. So that's the only thing that when you get that big, that becomes in the sphere of influence. So when you're a leader, you have to consider, what is my price per share doing, and how the decisions I make, how is it going to affect the price per share?
Is there a solution to that, or is it just like a broken aspect of the system?
I think there's,
well, you could eliminate the debt.
Yeah, you can eliminate the debt. And so
the company's debt? Yeah, but they're still like, take Apple. Apple's still subject to what the market does and what the shareholders want.
Sure, absolutely. But I think when you take on, like, for an example,
and plus every company's in debt because it's viable to be in debt.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's more beneficial to be in debt than not be in debt.
Yeah, yeah. And if you want to grow and you're a smaller company, or you want to take that big leap, you have to have cash infusion, and so you go become publicly traded, and then you get all that cash infusion and you grow and you have to do a new product segment or whatever. And so, do I think there's really a solution? No. Can you have more balance? I believe you can, because I do see some companies that I feel like continue to try and balance the quality of their product, and they are truly trying to seek what consumers want while still valuing what their quarterly earnings are. Because it's the same customer. This customer you're providing a product to, but this customer who invests in you, you're providing a product to, because they're investing their funds in you, and so you're
you have to provide something back.
Yeah, your product is, I'm providing growth for what you've invested in my company. So both are the consumers. Just which side of the ledger are we trying to please here? And so, do I think there's a solution to it? No. But do I think we can have more balance to it for big business? Yes. And I think, I think certain companies try to do that.
Do you have an example of a company?
Yeah, I was just trying to, I was like,
that does it well?
Yeah, that does it well.
The ones that come to mind for me, I believe, are ones that are not publicly traded, that are privately owned, like the Arizona Tea company, where like they're still 99 cents a can. The guy's like, over my dead body will we raise this price?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like, there's companies that what I would say are like more retail based that I think would probably do well. So like Tractor Supply would be a good example. And so where they don't make anything, but they're offering a product and a service. And so their quarterly earnings are growing leaps and bounds. But what they're doing is they're creating a one-stop shop at a value proposition for a certain market segment. So they typically serve a rural segment, and you can go in and you can get stuff for your farm, stuff for your tires, your tractor, get all your tools, and then you can get all the feed for any animal you got on there. You can go get all your livestock feed, your pet food, all those things. And they're trying to drive a value proposition. But yet, they put quality brands in there. You typically don't see, like, they have their economy brands, but they're typically their brands that somebody else makes for them.
Yeah, yeah. It's like a large box store like Lowe's or
right,
Home Depot or.
But I think Tractor Supply does a pretty good job of doing value add offerings, and they truly try and look at what's value add for the consumer. Their prices are pretty competitive if you go into a Lowe's and they're trying to consolidate everything that you would typically have to get from multiple places. So I think they add a value proposition for that. This is what our consumer wants. These are the things that are valuable for our consumer because they're called the Out Here brand. So they're looking for you join their neighborhood club and you get rewards based on what you buy there. And it's their whole tagline is, we have things for life out here. And so they've got a very great brand following. And I just happen to like that tagline because I think it's clever for the consumer segment that they service. And so, but I think they do a pretty good job of doing that. Or like H-E-B Grocery, not publicly traded, but they do a great job on quality.
But again, they're not publicly traded,
Right.
so like they only have one. They're only
Right.
slave to one
Right.
section.
Yeah. Yeah. But you also think too, even though you're not publicly traded, if you have shareholders within that private entity, you are
Sure.
trying to,
Sure.
drive that price per share for them. So, but you're typically not as much pressure because there's not typically as many of them. You're not dealing with millions of shareholders like a big company. You're only dealing with like maybe a couple hundred. But yeah, I mean, you see all the brands they bring into their store. Like think boots, for example. Like if you went to Justin and Wrangler, used to, I mean, you'd have to go to multiple stores for that. But now, you can go to Tractor and I can get a pair of jeans and I can get a pair of boots and then I can get all my feed for the day. And then I can grab some tools too. Versus if I go to like a Western wear store, I can only get my boots and I can only get my jeans. And so I think that to me is, and that's just because I happen to like that you can go into one store and it's convenient.
Saves time.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the most valuable things for anybody is time.
I like that. I like that choice. We buy our pet food from, I believe it's called Pet Sense.
Yep.
And they're part of the Tractor Supply. And I was in there the other day buying a dolly, and they're like, "Oh, you have points on here." Like, what are you talking about? I haven't been in here forever, and I was able, $15 off. I was like, "Whoa, that's kind of crazy."
Yeah. And a lot of the staff that work in a Tractor Supply, they typically do the same thing that customer segment does. So they typically either have land, they're doing the same things that the customer is. So like, like a traditional old time feed store that still is in existence, you see less of those because they don't have as much variety. But they're going to be more knowledgeable than maybe a person at Tractor Supply because they've been in the industry for a long time and they do that.
Yeah.
But there's enough knowledge within their base that they can be really helpful to the consumer, because typically the person that's going into Tractor Supply has probably done some research on what product they want to buy. And so I just think they do a good job.
All right. Yeah. TSC, reach out. We would love to work with you.
What about the constant growth model that it seems like we're trapped in too?
Yeah. I'm not a big fan of the constant growth model. I think you've got and it all depends on what your long-term goal is. So ultimately, if you're a business owner and you want to sell the company, you want to be in constant growth mode so you can increase your revenue so that you can sell your company for a very high dollar. But if you're trying to create something, I think you grow for a little bit, you learn to maintain it, and then you do it very well, and then you grow some more. But I think at some point you grow too fast, or there's diminishing returns. So like as being in a business that's in growth mode right now, where we're building a new facility, in order for us to compete in the market, we had to grow to more facilities to compete in the marketplace. So from like a fiduciary standpoint, we're thinking, okay, one, for our shareholders, and two, for our employees, to make sure we maintain jobs and make sure we can have careers, we have to grow to maintain be competitive, or the market share will shrink that we can go after, therefore shrinking our margins, because we'll have to compete on price, not based on where we can locate closer to our customers' distribution centers and their point of sales. But I think I'm not a huge fan of the constant growth. because your sole focus is just on one part of the
One
company.
metric.
Yeah. Can I increase my sales, and by how much? And you typically are not going to be focused on employee engagement, employee retention. What can you offer your employees? So you're not going to be necessarily focused on quality. Quality be a portion of it because there's regulatory stuff involved with that, but it's not your ultimate goal. You're just trying to increase sales. If I increase sales, if I can keep selling more, then I can continue to grow. So in general, I'm not. I think growth is a necessary evil, or not. There's the word. I think you have to grow to keep yourself relevant, and if you want to compete for the long term. No, I'm okay.
Almost like growing a podcast.
Exactly. Yeah, you just got to keep doing it.
Yeah, you just gotta keep doing it. How big is too big for a church?
Ooh.
I think there's a transition there.
Yeah, there's a good transition there.
Yeah. What's the constant growth model of a church?
Yeah, that's a hard one for me because I think you look biblically, and you look at the first century church. A big church was probably 200. A massive church was probably 200.
Yeah.
Because they were typically house churches, and you're in very small agrarian communities.
Plus, they're losing members every day to the Coliseum getting eaten by lions.
Eat my lions, and and doing that. So I mean, there's a natural attrition rate.
Yeah.
I think I can't really answer that. My thoughts are that I really think when you start getting above the 1,000, 1,500 range, I think it's very hard to maintain a sense of community. And keep people connected.
You think at 1,000, 1,500? Like, I would argue smaller than that.
Yeah.
What's the stat for how many relationships one person can hold in their head?
Oh, yeah. That's a good stat to know.
So, like, take your pastor.
Yeah.
Should your pastor know everybody in the church? To the best of his ability.
I don't think they should.
You don't think they should?
I don't think they should. Because ultimately...
150.
150.
Stable social relationships at a time. Yeah. Because I think... So I'm very much a firm believer that the church is a church of saints, right? And so, for example, the pastor is particularly gifted to teach and equip the saints for the work of ministry. And so I think for the pastor to have a relationship with his entire congregation is, quite frankly, an impossible standard to set. Now, if you're a church of 20...
Define relationship.
Well, let's
may have knowledge of what's going on in their life.
Let's look at this right here, right?
Knows their name?
It's talking about
knows their name? Is that good enough? Should they know everyone's name?
Should try.
Should
try.
Yeah, but knowing somebody's name is not
I know.
stable social relationship.
Yeah.
No, I don't. Like, that's obviously, like, you can't do that with everybody in your life.
No.
Like, how many, like, you got a bunch of people who work under you at your company. You stated the importance of knowing kind of where they're at in their life and their names and stuff like that. I'm guessing that goes beyond the 150.
Yeah. So, like, I've got 145 employees that are
he's tapping out.
within.
You're almost there.
I'm almost there. But I mean, I think to my point is like, I think there's a different goal there though. So I think that's the thing about maybe the difference between business is that, I'm trying to make sure they're treated with respect and that they're loyal. But like I truly, I think because of, what I believe, I think I see the intrinsic value there.
Yeah. Well, there's also the difference in relationship in that the employees are there to service the business.
Right.
And the church is there to service the people coming in.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
So the customer versus employee relationship is completely different.
Exactly. And I mean, I think, and it depends. Like my view of a church is like, I want everybody to come to my church because I think we're doing great stuff. But can we effectively foster and train and disciple 5,000 people? Not right now. But can you build systems and things like that to do that?
But would it not be better for a church to split in a good way at that point. Like, okay, it's time to start dividing because we're too big.
Yeah. Like, so like, for example, like, what Matt Chandler did with, his church.
Not familiar.
So he had a huge church, and they had multiple campuses and things of that nature. Yeah, the Village Church. So Village Church had multiple campuses all over the Metroplex. And then probably about 4 or 5 years ago, he said, you know what? Each church is going to be their own entity. Like, they're not going to roll up to the church in Flower Mound. They're going to have their own campus pastor. They're going to be totally independent. And so he went away from that megachurch model with multiple campuses, and very similar to like what Francis Chan did. So you see some what I would call the bigger evangelical pastors. Some have gone away from that megachurch model, to your point, where they said we're too big, and the communities that we're serving, where our buildings are wildly different. We're, think about a church like Nacogdoches versus somewhere that's in an urban area of Dallas. We're going to serve a totally different population, and we're going to have totally different perspectives and maybe emphasis points based on the area that we live in, because there's going to be different things that are affecting it at different times. And so I think his one of the things he did that, which I found really interesting. And so to your point, I think I really don't. I mean, I like a smaller church personally because but I don't know what that magic number is when you're too big.
Yeah.
But I think in general, when you can't foster community, just like, at our church, like I typically can notice when someone's new. Like we're small enough still that like if I see a new face, I typically can recognize that's a new face. I don't know them.
Yeah.
Or I haven't seen them here before. And so I think if that becomes commonplace, that maybe is a signaling point, like either that, like we're growing so great and people are coming to the Lord, and that's great too. But at some point you have to transition from, I'd call it from general evangelism to discipleship. And how do you do that? And I think that's where that breaking point is. How can I?
Well, and you can have like the captains over 10s, over 100s. Like you can split the church up in that way that Moses split up the people.
Yeah.
But like, to use your term, value proposition, at what point do you lose the value that you're providing to the community?
Yeah. And I think the bigger you get, I think finances start coming into play.
Oh yeah, money is there's a lot of money in religion.
Yeah. And
just like politics.
Oh yeah.
A lot of money.
Yeah, because I think the bigger you get, you have facilities to manage, and so then the temptation of tailoring your message.
Don't forget the G5s too that you need. Jets,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you got to have your Gulfstreams every once in a while. But I think so I don't think there's a magic number there, but I think in general, if you can foster discipleship and community effectively, then that's your main goal. But I think it's just we're in such a different place than when we were from the first century church. From a cultural standpoint, and just the closeness of people and the distance that we live from each other and all that kind of stuff. So maybe that's a way of skirting around that answer a little bit.
You're being political about it.
I'm being political about it. Yeah.
Come first, full circle.
Yeah.
All right. Well, any closing thoughts?
No, just.
I'm done with this conversation.
I'm done with this conversation now. Now, I think just to encourage you too, I think a lot of people I hear a lot more people watching the podcast and think it's really, really good. And so I know it's hard starting a new thing and creating a new thing, but just to encourage you, I think people are watching and finding value in it. And I think there's been people that have been impacted by people's stories on the podcast.
Well, I've had a couple comments from someone who came on, like Terrell mentioned, that someone called up and said, "Hey, I heard some stuff you said, and it was like, it was impactful and meaningful to me, and changed my way of thinking." And I appreciate that. Like, and that means a lot to me, like, because I don't feel like I'm wasting Terrell's time.
For sure. Yeah. And I had a similar experience, like after, I think it was the second time I came on the podcast, like I had a couple of friends reach out like, "Man, it was so good to hear your story again." And it just reminded me about these aspects of the Lord or whatever it was. And so, I mean, I think people are finding a lot of value for it. And so keep on going,
Good.
guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always fun just to come shoot the shiz too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that as well.
We did do that tonight. So
Yeah,
but
we
thank you
did.
guys for having me on. I
All
appreciate
right.
it.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, you bet.
See you next time.
Yep.
Like I'm doing the sideline talk, interviewing the players. How was it for you?
Yeah.
Like I'm John Madden on the sideline interviewing the quarterback. After,
John Madden's not so bad. He made a good
did he
career
die?
a while ago.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
He kind of falls into that Betty White. Didn't she just recently die?
Yeah. That was last year.
Bob Barker kind of.
Yeah, the people who like they just you ever seen the meme where it's like the Grim Reaper's at a one of those claw machines and he's like, give me Betty White, Betty White. Oh damn it, I got Chris Tucker.
Oh no!
Although I believe Chris Tucker's still alive. But someone else. Bob
Yeah.
Saget. I got Bob Saget.
Oh no! No, I haven't seen that one.
Yeah. Yeah, Madden. How'd we get here? Josh Evans.
Yeah,
Good one.
Josh Evans. What do you think?
I really enjoyed how again, like I said this before, how the conversation evolved because it went places I didn't
Right.
expect. And he's certainly got perspective on big business and manufacturing and those slim margin industries. While also putting a whole lot of dedication into his faith and like understanding and having a good relationship with Christ.
Yeah, I was encouraged to hear that he's been journaling for 10 years. I'm not a journaler, and I never really put any sort of thought into why I'm not. But him,
You just don't want things on the record.
maybe that's it, right? But when I was a wee lad, I had a diarrhea journal, whatever. I don't know when I stopped. Probably whenever I hit puberty. But the thought that it was feminine never really crossed my mind. But it also makes me think, okay, what are some other stumbling blocks in my own perceptions of journaling that I might need to address and overcome? Because obviously there's something there.
Do we need to do a deep dive on journaling?
Maybe just writing in general. Maybe. No, it was a great talk. Man, I love it. I love it when Josh is in the room. He just brings like a different kind of light. He's
It's like a solidness there.
yeah. But
Like, ooh, look, there's one of those pillars over there that we can lean on.
right. Yeah, solid pillar, light. I'm surprised he knows as many people on his at his company. That's pretty huge because I used to work in a manufacturing environment. And what he's talking about with regards to that, 100% true.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially with upper executives walking through and just not even knowing who anybody is.
You're just a number.
Yeah, definitely something to that.
Not even a face, just a number.
Just a number.
Although with that beard, you're probably hard to forget.
Right.
It's like the beard guy
No,
with the round glasses, the sharp glasses.
not one to forget.
No. All right. Where are we available?
Hey guys, we're on YouTube. Anywhere that you can find a podcast, definitely check us out. We also got social media. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X for those newbies. Yeah.
I think the X account gets the least love. It's probably because we're not verified. We're not paying them money. So
I'll have to call Elon about that and see if we can get our verified status back. But yeah, go check us out. Give us a like, give us a comment. Tell us what you think about the show. We drop new episodes every Thursday. So stay tuned for that. And for you loyal listeners, we sure do appreciate it.
Thank you. Yes, we do appreciate it. It's
Yeah.
definitely strong encouragement that steady build and people who come back every week
Yeah, agreed.
to listen to us talk about shit.
Yep.
See ya.
Bye.
Back to the one takes.
Right.